Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
What? How? Charles mumbled confusedly as he looked at the test results, but the confusion was quickly replaced by horror. Molly, how? What now, tell me? What can I say? This is no longer my concern. You are no longer in my life. Advise, for example, with a young wife, with the mother of your child. And you divorced me, may I remind you. Charles slumped in his chair, clutching at his hair with his fingers inserted. As if to Molly, this news was such a trifle. Divorced or not, 10 years together still meant something. Was it easy for her now, letting her seriously ill husband go to another woman? Would she, this Lara, be able to take care of him the way Molly would? Would she fight for Charles' life? Molly herself learned of her husband's diagnosis while he was on a week-long business trip. She had become adept at talking to doctors, so she went alone to get the results, and when she got them, she sat in the corridor of the oncology clinic. At first, she froze with horror, but it was not long. Soon enough, the woman began to lay out a treatment plan and think about how she would inform Charles himself. It wouldn't be easy, but let him hear everything from his wife, a loyal friend who could be supportive and reassuring. But you can't tell such news over the phone, even to a man far from home. So when Charles called in the evening and asked what the doctor had said, she calmly said, "Don't worry, everything is fine. That is, some treatment is required, but don't worry about anything. You just come back soon, Charles, I miss you." And if she knew how her dear husband would return, with whom so much has already passed, experienced for 10 years after the wedding. They were married very young, without a stake, without a yard, only with ambitions and Napoleonic plans. That is, it was Charles who made the plans. Molly was just happy to have even that dorm room, which was their first home together. But Charles was not happy. He was sure he had to do everything to make sure that his wife and the children that would someday come along wouldn't need anything. "Believe me, Molly, you will soon have everything. You will never regret marrying me." Every day he said. But with children, though, everything didn't work out as dreamed. Molly got pregnant almost immediately after the wedding, about which she informed her husband, expecting delight, but everything turned out differently. "Come on, Molly, what are we doing with kids now? Think about it. You're gonna have a baby, and what are you gonna do? Where are you gonna bring it? Where are we gonna put the crib, the stroller? Where will you prepare the formula? In the communal kitchen. Where's that fat fool, always frying fish and onions? Bathing the baby in a rusty bathtub? Understand, my dear, we don't have time for children right now. We have no right to bring the child into this dump. He will not thank us for such a start in life, especially since the improvements will be much further than we plan." Yes, everything Charles said was very logical and correct, but Molly still cried bitterly and said that it was their firstborn. It was a pity. But still her husband had to obey. The firstborn was not born, and because of this, as it turned out later, his younger brothers and sisters could not be born. But the improvements began, although there were many difficulties, but they were young, loved each other, and about children for a long time just did not think. In order that Charles could start his business, had to take a large loan, and the payment of each installment at first knocked them out of the rut, making them sometimes literally sit on bread and water, but it did not last long. Very soon Charles and his partner David went to Phil, paid off the loan, took an apartment in the mortgage, but this time such hardship and excitement was not. They knew that soon everything will be paid back. Even the fact that there was a new item of expenditure was not very worried, more worried about the result, or rather, It's absence. After 5 years of living together, Molly realized that pregnancy does not come by chance. She started going to doctors, trips to sanatoriums, examinations, treatment, IVF, other procedures ending with nothing. Molly, I am afraid that you are these treatments for non-existent diseases, not to improve your health and finally kill the body. You're not sick, but you don't get out of these doctors. Who needs it? What do you mean? Molly was surprised. Who needs our baby? Everyone keeps telling me there's still a chance. And while there is, I still do not want to give up. If in another 5 years nothing will work out, we will think about adoption. Fine, in 5 years we'll start. In the meantime, take a vacation from therapy. I'm sick of it, honestly. Yes, Molly had noticed that Charles wasn't exactly cold to her, but not without it. Yes, the passionate love that brought them together is gone, but divorce is out of the question, even though she is infertile. Yes, the husband is often not attentive, sometimes irritated, rude, often delayed at work, goes on business trips. What can you do? He's a businessman. Molly even thought about coming to work with me. But first of all, because of her early marriage, she didn't get a good education, only a sewing school. Uncomfortable somehow, the wife of a businessman and suddenly a simple seamstress. And secondly, she was used to being a housewife. She liked it. The money that she could get, working, not the slightest importance for the budget of their family would not have. But the time from housekeeping, work would take a lot. And she had to go to the doctors, which sometimes took days. But David, the husband's partner, also has a wife who doesn't work, and they don't have children, but it seems to be by mutual desire. David married later than Charles. His wife is Kayla, younger than Molly, and she certainly does not think about work. And she wouldn't want kids in her life either. Kayla doesn't sit at home. She's always busy, going out, parties, receptions, traveling, or shopping in the extreme case. To Molly, that lifestyle seemed wild. She didn't talk to Kayla, though she didn't judge her. Each to their own. Everything would have gone on like that. But Charles started to get a little short-tempered in the last year. At first it was nothing, not worth worrying about and paying attention to. Well, stomach aches, the most common thing for a man. At work, do not think about normal nutrition. All on the go dry food. That's your gastritis. He didn't pay much attention to it. He'd take a pill and then he'd be fine. Molly was more worried. Gastritis, but it must be treated or before you know it, and the ulcer will turn into an ulcer. How many times did she talk her husband into it? Charles, go see a doctor. I'll make an appointment for you soon. When can you do it? This week? Not this week, not next week. I don't have time to go to the doctor. You're the one who likes to be cured. And how much did those doctors help you? All they did was siphon off a lot of money. That's all they did for you. Molly saw her husband every day, so she did not see any big changes in his appearance, but once a neighbor stopped her and asked, "Why has Charles lost so much weight and his face is yellow? You'd better get him to a doctor, because these men always drag on, and then we have to deal with them." And Molly, having looked closely, aghast, and indeed, her Charles has lost weight, and looks bad, and eats not quite the same as before. But what doctors are there? Even those herbal teas that Molly had brewed couldn't be made to drink. Oh, how Molly berated herself later for not being persistent enough. She had never been able to be any kind of firm with her husband, never defended her opinion. Only when Charles himself could no longer hide anything, once grabbed his stomach and could not hold back a groan, she could not stand it. "Charles, we can't go on like this. I'm calling a doctor and we're going to start treatment right away. I can't watch you ruin yourself. Her husband's reaction frightened her even more than his moans. "Well, Cole, what can I do?" "I'm not refusing." And his voice is so confused, helpless, he knows it's bad. At first, of course, called a simple district doctor from the polyclinic to do general tests that, except for referrals and those drugs that Charles and already takes, can prescribe the district doctor. But with these results, it is possible to address to a more serious specialist. More serious examinations began, and very soon the scary word oncologist was heard. So far, no one has not made a diagnosis, just referred for examination to this specialist, but who wouldn't be scared? So what is it? Do I have cancer? Charles asked me bluntly. I'm not saying that. On the contrary, you need to be examined to rule out such a diagnosis. The doctor answered without looking up from his writing. Or to confirm it? Half affirmative, said Charles, and start the right treatment if it is confirmed. The doctor raised his eyes, looking firmly at Charles. There's no need to be afraid, even if it is cancer. It's not a verdict. Nowadays, this disease is treated, and sometimes quite successfully. Very comforting, mumbled the patient. All the way home, Molly consoled her husband, saying that nothing terrible had happened yet. Most likely he did not have any cancer. They send everyone to an oncologist to rule out all risks. I got checked out too, remember? You're gonna be fine. You'll just have to take better care of yourself. It's easy for you to say, you'll be fine, you'll live and I'll die. Charles was scared, confused, and ready for the worst. Molly was no less frightened, but her fear did not paralyze her. On the contrary, it made her mobilize all her strength. Don't be silly. First of all, it is not yet known what you are sick. And secondly, even the worst is not a verdict. You're young, you've never been sick, so stop dying before you die. By the time we got home, Charles, however, calmed down a little, cheered himself up, talked about other things. Okay, I'll give them this biopsy, and we'll see that I have nothing special, but then I swear I'll sue them all. You're scaring the hell out of me with your innuendo. And he got so calm that he didn't even wait for the biopsy results. He went on a business trip. Molly was terrified. Are you out of your mind? What kind of business trip are you going on? The usual, same as always. What's wrong now? I feel fine, and I have to go. Who's going for me? Is it you? David can't go? It's your business together. He's traveling too, he can't go. And why are you meddling in something you don't understand? Why are you always meddling, Molly? But the biopsy results haven't come back yet. Well, they will be without me. You can call me and find out. I don't think I'm gonna die of illness. I think I'm gonna die of your whining. I had the impression that Charles just couldn't wait to get away from home, from his wife, from all the doctors. Well, maybe that would actually be easier for him. He feels like a healthy man, at work among his colleagues, does not think about his illness, but at home, I remind him. And the truth is, we don't know anything yet. Maybe there's no cancer in there. He would not forget about a normal diet and medication, and I can't really help in such a situation. Molly thought, consoling herself with these thoughts. But it was still so hard on her soul, and as it turned out, not in vain. A few days later, after Charles left, the doctor called and said that the diagnosis was confirmed. Cancer, stage 4. There are metastases. It is urgent to start treatment, the result of which no one can guarantee either. Charles also called the same day, asked if the answer had come. Of course, I couldn't tell the truth. Come back soon, missed you. She herself was crying. How could she? But she quickly wiped her tears. What was the use of crying? We have to work out a treatment plan. Now the whole life will go in a different direction. And also, It was necessary to think how to tell Charles the truth more gently, carefully, and somehow to cope with the explosion of emotions that would undoubtedly follow this message. I wish he would come sooner to deal with the matter and begin the treatment. They will manage to defeat the terrible disease. They will be together for a long, long time. And so, the key turned in the lock. It came, but not alone. Yes, Charles had had a second family for a long time. He didn't realize how it came about. During one corporate party, he met a beautiful young waitress named Lara. Under the influence of alcohol and the feeling of freedom, it seemed that he fell in love and realized that she did not mind. And somehow it happened that they woke up together in her house. Yes, at first I was ashamed because for the first time I cheated on Molly, my favorite wife. And then it just sort of occurred to me. So what? I've been faithful for almost 5 years, so this one time doesn't matter at all. Molly won't find out, so it's okay, it won't happen again. She's a good girl though, I'll give her that. I thought that everything would be limited to a one-time meeting, but somehow it turned out that they agreed on the next one. So a casual connection was reborn into a relationship, mutually pleasant and not burdensome. Lara didn't mind at all. She wanted the relationship to continue. At the same time, knowing that her new acquaintance was married, the girl did not insist on somehow strengthening her position. So she said, "You do not think, I do not want to get married. I do not even want a permanent relationship. I just like you. That's all, just like you like me. If we don't like each other, we'll just break up." Right. Well, Charles was quite happy with that arrangement. His work involved frequent, albeit short, trips around the state to neighboring cities. So the rhythm of his family life was hardly disturbed. He and his mistress lived in different parts of the city. They did not have common acquaintances, so there was no fear that his wife would find out. The fact that his business trips became a little longer, she seemed to see nothing wrong, and Charles had the opportunity, between business, to spend another day in the pleasant company of a beautiful girl, and after 3 months of such meetings, Lara announced that she was pregnant. It was an accident. She did not intend in any way to bind to herself a married lover. She was confused, discouraged by what had happened. What should I do? I'm not going to mutilate myself with abortions. Charles realized that she was right. He already knew how badly it could end for the woman because the real cause of Molly's infertility was the first abortion. You're right, Lara. It's not an option. But I can't get a divorce. I can't leave my wife. If you have the baby, I won't leave you or the baby. I'll put it in my name. I'll help you all my life, but I can't get a divorce. And please, do I need you? You can live with your wife or with your husband. Just pay alimony. Lara said, irritated. It was their first spat, and Charles thought that this would be the end of the relationship. On the one hand, it was upsetting. He was used to this cheerful beauty, but on the other hand, maybe it was for the best. Still less hassle, and do not pull this relationship forever. I'll pay money, Molly won't know, and no one will know. And I'll still have a kid. That's not a bad thing. But the spat didn't turn into a breakup. While Lara was pregnant, Charles visited her quite often, brought fruit, money, did not stay long, spent a few hours, and he became more and more attached to the girl in whom a part of himself already lived. It was so unusual, so touching. Then Gary was born. It was already a real blessing, and Charles even thought for the first time about telling Molly. But then something happened to her health. She finally realized that all attempts to get pregnant would be unsuccessful. No, it would be too cruel for a woman in that condition to talk about having a child. Charles remembered that he had initiated the termination of that first pregnancy, and the guilt called for a wife stronger than the bonds of marriage. But with Lara, things had gotten better, and so it went on. He lived in 2 houses, having already gotten used to his 2-story business trips and the need to distribute attention and resources between 2 women. And then Lara, apparently, finally tired of such an uncertain position, or perhaps she was convinced that no one else, too, did not hurry to lead her to the wedding. And here, as if a ready family, Charles does not refuse a child, but also does not refuse his wife. Lara didn't put the question, just hinted at it. The baby's growing up. How are we going to explain to him why Daddy is so rarely home? We'll explain it somehow. All dads work. You should understand. We had an agreement. That's what we agreed. But as time goes on, we change. In any case, change, and you, as you said in the beginning, I can't, and you keep on doing it. And you don't know what you can't do. Charles really didn't know he was fine with Lara, and Molly was just as good. Besides, these Lara claims coincided with his health. Charles even thought that his illness started not from the fact that he was somehow eating wrong, but from nerves, not digesting the situation. While at Lara's house, he thought, I'd like to stay here. She makes me feel like a human being. With Molly, I feel like an invalid. She's been bothering me all day. How are you feeling? Did you take those pills and the herbal tea? Have you taken your blood pressure? Go to bed early tonight. You look tired. What do you want for breakfast, oatmeal or semolina? That kind of talk can make anyone sick. But after a few hours of living with his mistress, I was drawn home to my wife, just to her worries. Especially when my stomach started to ache. My side started to stab. The mere sight of pizza, rolls, grilled chicken, greasy cream cakes made him sick. It was all Lara's staple food, and thus Gary's. She's gonna ruin my boyfriend. I should take him away, move in with Molly, forget Lara altogether. But he realized the impossibility of that plan. That time, too, he came to Lara with the desire to rest not so much from work, from the domestic routine, from wandering around doctors' offices and clinics, from the anxieties associated with it. He was feeling quite well these days, and for some reason the anxieties had gone, as well as the pains that had already become habitual. All these doctors' forecasts were nonsense. He's healthy, that's all. He has a woman and a son growing up. What's there to be upset about, to say goodbye to life? He called his wife and she confirmed it. She found out the results of the biopsy. Everything's fine. His mood was even better. He wanted to hug and kiss Lara and Gary. Somehow he loved them very much at that moment. Lara, on the other hand, had a very different emotion. What? That was your phone call. She lost you? Come on. Don't worry the woman. Go to her, kiss her, and hug her. You hear that, Gary? Your daddy's going to another aunt. He's fed up with us. Come on, Lara. Don't involve the child in this, Charles asked. Involve him in what? Why not? Your child will be going to school soon. What will he say to a question about Daddy? What about you? What did you tell me last time? Remember, I'll remind you, it's no problem. I told you that everything was about to be over, that it was about to be over. What am I saying? You've been saying that for years. I've got a big son, and you're still in the middle of a flight, or underflight, or overflight. Charles walked with big steps around the room and thought, what am I really doing? We only live once. I recently almost looked into the place where all the scenery ends. Do I have to keep pushing? You feel sorry for Molly? Yes, I do. But who's stopping you from feeling sorry for her from a distance? She still has time to find someone else and live happily ever after. and I can live with my wife and son. Maybe we can have another baby with Lara." And suddenly, he gave me a command. "That's enough. Pack your things. Let's go." "Where to?" Lara was dumbfounded. "Home is where, enough really. We have a child. What else is there to drag?" Charles took out a suitcase from the closet. "What about yours?" Already from the depths of the closet, Lara said, "Not your concern. She should understand, too. Gary, pack your toys. We're going home now. You'll have your own room there." "Isn't that great?" "Yay," the boy said, and began to pack up his stuff. "Okay, don't take too much. We'll come back and get the rest. The rent is paid until the end of the month anyway." "Housekeeping," said Lara. "You're crazy, Charles. It didn't make a noise. It didn't rattle." "You're the one who didn't make any noise or rattle?" Charles grinned. On the way home, he recovered from this momentary impulse, but it was too late to fix anything. Feeling the drilling pain inside him again, he thought, "Yeah, it's definitely from nerves. What's there to be nervous about? Let's wait to see what happens." Molly waited for her husband, prepared dinner, thought about how to inform Charles about the terrible diagnosis. When he entered the apartment not alone, but with a young woman and a child of about 5 years old in front of him. "Do we have company?" Molly asked, confused. "Why didn't you warn me?" "Guests, guests," sassy said the girl. "We are hosts, not guests. Explain to your ex, Charles, who is here. And me and Gary, we need to explore the territory. I am Madam, his favorite woman, and this boy is our son." "Yes, Molly, shall we go and talk?" Trying to be firm and decisive, Charles suggested. "And you, yes, while you look around, figure out where you will be more comfortable." He took his wife by the elbow, pushed her toward the kitchen, inhaled the smells that made his stomach ache even more. Oh, how he needed this vegetable broth, these steamed cutlets, mashed potatoes. But that's later. First, the unpleasant conversation. "You see, Molly, I should have come clean sooner, but I didn't. This Lara and I have been together for a long time. We have a son together. And you know, I brought them here to live together. They don't have a place to live. That's just the way it is. Is this a joke? Are you crazy?" She really didn't understand anything, refused to believe what she had heard and seen. It was just unreal. "It's not a joke, and it's not crazy. I realize I'm a scoundrel, a bastard, but what can I do? We can't live here together, as you know. I won't put Lara and the baby out on the street, so you pack your things and I'll call a cab. Everything will be fine. What route will you give the cab driver?" "I have nowhere to go." Molly realized the absurdity of the situation, but she couldn't help believing in what was happening. She was being kicked out of the house, and there seemed to be nothing she could do about it. "So it's very simple." Charles exclaimed excitedly. "There's a hotel not far away, and you can get a room and stay a few days. Until you find something more acceptable and permanent. I don't think a divorce would be difficult. We don't have children. I hope you won't be dividing up the property either. I mean, you can take what you need, your things and your dishes. Well, within reason, of course, we still have a child. Don't worry about the rest. I'll give you the money. Be careful with the money. We need something to live on. So one head is not poor, and I've saved money while I was living with you. Lara, don't interfere. It's our business." Acting like a strict husband, Charles said. Oh. The new mistress mockingly stretched out. "Coo, of course, but I have to feed the child. Go and help her pack her stuff and send it off." Charles and Molly went to pack. Again, he pulled out a dusty suitcase from somewhere, helped to shove into it the clothes of his, almost already ex-wife. I could call the police right now." Molly said thoughtfully, "Maybe this girl will not be thrown out. She has a child, love, all the things. But no one can forbid me to be here, can they? And what do you want us all to live here together?" Charles jumped up. "The apartment is mostly mine. I bought it. I paid the mortgage too. You didn't work. You didn't do anything. You didn't even look after yourself. Look what you've become. What do you want now? A swap? Turn this place into a communal apartment? God forbid. I'll leave, of course, but it's enough that I'll carry everything at once. I'll come back later for what's left. I'll leave, first of all, because I hate living with you. And secondly, I'm sorry, it's not good news. The biopsy results are back. You have stage 4 cancer. There's some paperwork on your desk. Don't lose it. See a doctor as soon as possible, preferably with your wife. And I, fortunately, am now free from the duties of caring for a seriously ill person and from the spectacle of your slow decline." Molly was unbearably ashamed to speak like that. She could not escape the petty gloating that seized her, but she felt painfully sorry for Charles, who had suddenly turned gray, slumped on the sofa, clutching some rag in his hands. "Are you serious?" he squeezed out. "More than serious. Here are the documents. Look for yourself. Go to the doctor. Without me, you are no longer in my life." She picked up her suitcase and bag, headed for the door. On the way, she looked into the kitchen, where Lara was feeding the boy Molly's food. She wished him well and left, hoping that she had managed to maintain an independent, even almost cheerful look. Only when she was in the small hotel room, alone with herself, she gave vent to tears and fully appreciated the catastrophe that had happened. Charles tried to realize what his wife had said. He picked up the documents left on the table, but he couldn't read them. Everything swam before his eyes. It was unbearable to be alone. He went into the kitchen. "Did you seek him off?" Lara asked cheerfully. "Charles, did she always feed you this crap? Steamed, tasteless, pureed, no salt, no pepper. No wonder you're so skinny." "I like it," Gary said. "That's what I'm saying. It's all for toothless old men or babies. Give me your phone number. I'll at least order a pizza. What kind do you want?" She took a good look at Charles and was amazed. "Okay, what's wrong with your face? Are you sorry you sent her away? What are you talking about?" "I'm fine. Or did she say something? Scared the police, the courts? Well, you can forget about that. I'll show her the courts. Don't be discouraged either. You look like a handsomer man in a coffin. So what kind of pizza do you want?" Charles shuddered at such a comparison. "I don't know. I'm not hungry anyway. I'm going to lie down and rest. I'm tired." He walked out, not seeing Lara shake her head reproachfully. He wasn't going to tell his new, almost wife anything yet. If everything was as they said, she would find out soon enough, and something would happen then. Nothing good, I'm afraid. It seems that nothing good is waiting for me, and this at a time when I, you might say, for the first time believed in my happiness. I live with a beautiful woman I love. With my son, everything is good at work. I have money. To spend them on exhausting, perhaps, not bringing the result of treatment, and most importantly to spend time, not only my own. Now Lara and I have everything in common, including time. And who but me should do everything to make her life happy? But first I had to finalize the divorce. It turned out that his business partner and best friend, David, was already aware of the changes in Charles' personal life. I never realized that Molly was in contact with Kayla, David's wife. They never seemed to be friends, but it was through her that David learned of the impending divorce. Thanks for not telling me about her illness. Charles decided to keep silent for the time being, And then, as it turned out, David survived the silent disapproval after all. He didn't have to answer to anyone in such matters. The divorce really wasn't difficult. A month later, he and Molly met in court, where they formalized the end of their relationship. When Molly saw her ex-husband, she gasped, "Charles, are you in therapy? You don't look your best. I look fine, and in general, my wife and I are doing great. How are you doing?" "Fine, too." "Well, I'm happy for you, but you should see a doctor. Don't take too long." Molly's heart really sank at the sight of her now ex-husband. It's clear he's not getting treatment, he's not dieting. But what does Molly care about that? That is, the matter may be, and there is, after all, 10 years together, relatives, you can say, just to influence now on what is happening in the life of her ex-husband. She can no longer in any way, and even if she tries, nothing good will come out of it. She will be accused of all the deadly sins. As it almost happened with Kayla and David, who turned out to be the only, if not friends, then good acquaintances, after she left her husband. Then when she left home, she found herself all alone, with no idea how to move on. Yes, Charles had given her a certain amount of money on which to live for a while, but then what to do? If she rented a hotel room, she wouldn't last long, and she didn't know what else to do. That's when she received a call from Kayla, who had learned about the treacherous deed of her husband's friend. Probably this young woman, led by the usual curiosity, or maybe she just had nothing to do. But either way, her involvement came in handy. She invited Molly to visit, promising advice, help in the current difficult situation. From Kayla, of course, what help? Charles immediately began to resent her, advising Molly to sue. The truth is on your side. Let him hang around with his scum. David was taking a more sober view of the situation. Wait, Kayla, whether you'll get rid of him or not. It's still a question, and in the meantime, Molly has to think how to live her life. Of course she does. Kayla was indignant. You'll always be on your boyfriend's side. All you men are like that. And I think I would have done the same thing myself. Throw me out the door in what I'm wearing. But I'm not Molly. You can't fight me. You'll end up with nothing. Molly, listening to Kayla's speeches, thought that soon she might be friends with this one. Lara was more suitable for her as a girlfriend than Molly. She liked David's plan better. He advised her to rent a place and get a job. Molly herself realized that it was the most suitable option. She just didn't know how to rent an apartment, how to look for a job. Years of living in a fixation on herself, her house and her husband had weaned the woman from making independent decisions. This is where David's help came in handy. Very quickly, Molly rented not an apartment, but a room in a dormitory corresponding to her finances. The job was also quickly solved. Molly remembered her education and got a job in a sewing shop. She was hired without much willingness, still a big break in the experience, and the salary at first was unenviable. But she knew how to count money and quickly distributed her finances so that she had enough to pay for her room and to live. At first, Molly often visited Kayla and David, shared her successes and failures, and frankly, hoped to hear something about her ex-husband, about his illness. She didn't tell her friends, and she didn't ask about Charles's affairs. But David saw him almost every day. But soon the opportunity to hear about Charles in this way disappeared. One day, when David had talked to Molly and left to go about his business, Kayla suddenly asked, "Tell me honestly, Molly, did you have something with my David?" Molly was literally stunned. She did not expect such a question. "No, not now, but in general. You knew him before, as far as I know." That was true. More than 10 years ago, Molly, a graduate of the sewing school, met Charles and David, a final year student. They both went after her, and for a while Molly herself didn't know which of the guys she liked better. Yes, Charles was more persistent, and at some point it seemed to her that he loved her more, and he was the first to propose. Who knows, if David had been more active in life would have been different. But all that was before, they had forgotten how they had kissed in the park. Really, Kayla, what could have happened? They knew each other, yes, but it was nothing like that. I don't know what happened before, but now I see him looking at you like a cat at sour cream. Don't make it up, please. Why not? You're a free woman now. Maybe you've got your eye on him yourself. Kayla spoke in jest, but her eyes were prickly and serious. What are you talking about, Kayla? It never happened and never could have happened. Don't make it up. I just don't want to be in your shoes, so I think of all sorts of things. After this conversation, Molly realized that the door to this house was closed to her. Whether David was looking at her, whether Kayla's fiction and fears were real or not, it didn't matter. But Molly didn't want to inconvenience the people who had treated her kindly, and she had enough to do. Trying not to indulge in sad thoughts, Molly worked hard, improved her skills, and tried to communicate more with people. Soon she had a lot of friends. There was no time for memories of her former life, and she thought about Charles less and less. He's probably doing fine, getting better and better. His wife was young, she was not a beast, and she loved him. Why else would she wait so many years? Why not take care of the man she loves? He's her husband, her child's father. More often she thought not even about her ex-husband, but about his son, little Gary, whom she had only seen a glimpse of. Sometimes it suddenly occurred to her how good it would have been if her husband had apologized to her at once, taken the boy away from his Lara, and they would have brought him up together. What kind of nonsense was going through her head? What kind of mother would give up her child? And she, by all accounts, is not a bad mother. There is nothing to accuse her of all sins. Molly reprimanded herself. Charles was doing really well, up to a point. Immediately after his divorce from Molly, he and Lara applied for marriage, and a month later became, finally, legally husband and wife. Fancy wedding did not play, decided that the money is better spent on a wedding trip, in which they departed soon. And that's where Charles's disease, which had been hidden until then, suddenly made itself known. It is not surprising. The change of climate, unusual food and drink, increased activity, but he was in no hurry to confess his illnesses to his young wife. He limited himself to staying in the hotel room more often, much to Lara's displeasure. Like many healthy people, she did not understand the sick and did not even believe in the existence and seriousness of diseases. Looking at her husband stretched helplessly on the bed, she said, "Charles, why are you spoiling my vacation? You are only 5 years older than me, and it seems that I married an ancient old man. You lie around all day like a turtle. Why do I have to go everywhere alone? Wouldn't you be jealous?" Charles smiled languidly and thought, "Amazing mental callousness. Doesn't she realize that I don't feel well? Wouldn't she have asked me? Suggested a pill? I would have sympathized. Molly would not leave me now. She would torture me with her questions and suggestions. Isn't it about time Lara confessed? I think it's time. I don't know if it'll work, though." But he decided to confess after his arrival. He didn't want to spoil the impression of his vacation. As a result, Charles arrived home almost alive, not even hugging Gary, who was left with the nanny. He went into the bedroom, collapsed on the unmade bed, and asked his wife to call an ambulance. "Oh, an ambulance. What's the matter with you, Charles? Is it really bad or what?" Lara finally understood. It's bad." Charles couldn't hold back any longer. "Well, bear with me. I'll get my things organized. Gary, what did we bring you as a present? What the hell is this? Can't she see anything?" Dialing the number of the ambulance myself, I thought, "Charles, this is how I'll die, and no one will give me a glass of water." The arrival of the doctors was an unpleasant surprise for Lara, who had not yet unpacked her things. She did not even come out to the patient, did not ask what was wrong with her husband, but she heard the doctors leaving. Charles was not hospitalized, only administered painkillers. As you can imagine, no ambulance or on-call hospital will treat something like this. Just go to your oncologist so you can get the treatment you need faster. After closing the door behind the doctor, Lara rushed to her husband. "Why did he say oncologist? Do you have that one?" She did not dare even to say the name of the disease aloud. Finally, she believed that I wasn't fooling around. Charles thought grimly and confessed, "I have cancer. I don't know how long I'll live, but the doctors say, so that's what it is." Lara said ominously, "That's why your purse so uncomplainingly slipped away. She left me not a husband, but a wreck. She herself was used to the fullest, and now I have to nurse a sick man." "What a clever idea. Well done. What are you talking about, Lara?" Charles asked pitifully. "What are you talking about?" "About the birds. You heard everything perfectly well and understand everything better than I do. You didn't need Lara when you were healthy, and now you're taking it out on me? God, why did I do it? I waited 5 years for you to turn me from a mistress into a wife. I gave birth to your son, and now I've got it. Who came up with that? You or her, Molly, your Molly? If she did, I see. Oh, clever, clever woman. Don't be like that. She had nothing to do with it. She lived for 10 years with a healthy man who provided for her to the fullest, didn't work, didn't give birth to children, lived for herself and pleasure. And when her husband got sick, she immediately made a run for it. I wonder why she leaves so quietly, not a tear, not a reproach. Why should she cry? She should be kissing my hands, dancing with joy. Don't be silly. She didn't know anything. She's a decent woman. She didn't want to hurt anyone. Of course, an angel in the flesh. She didn't leave you sick. No, she was kind. She gave you to me. Lara's a fool. Let her take the pots out while the angel Molly lives on her own, spending your money. How much did you give her? I didn't give her anything. Calm down. Charles tried not to get nervous, not to raise his voice. He knew that it might bring back the pain, but Lara continued to ravage, not even distracted by Gary. "But what's it to you?" shouted she at the child. "Why are you swearing? What's the matter with Daddy? Daddy, are you sick? Do not be afraid, baby. Everything is fine. Only you do not cry. I'm just tired." Charles tried to calm the child down. "Yeah, tired. Your daddy's tired of defending other people's aunts and lying to your mom. It's not enough for you, you little bastard. Now she has to go after your daddy. Get out of here. Don't listen to adult conversations or I'll rip your ears off. Lara, don't take it out on the kid. I'll take care of my soul, but leave him alone." But where was it? That day, everybody got it in for everyone. And the next day, Charles went to give himself up to the doctors. He was glad to be in the hospital, to be honest. There was no hope that Lara would calm down. Gary felt sorry for her, of course, but maybe she wouldn't yell at him when she was alone. A trip to the doctor's office, however, dashed that last hope. Charles was not even offered hospitalization. After the examination, it turned out that the disease is already seriously neglected. I was not hospitalized, although they prescribed treatment, and I had to go to various procedures. It did not give much relief, but something had to be done, and his condition was worsening. Charles was getting weaker, not by days but by hours. He lost interest in his surroundings, almost did not pay attention to his wife and child. At the next appointment, the doctor directly said that nothing more could be done. He only needed to ensure a dignified departure from life. Charles was ready for this. Moreover, he himself realized that his days were numbered, but it was very difficult to hear the confirmation. The only thing I can suggest is a palliative care unit and then perhaps a hospice, although there are some difficulties with placement there. Okay, it might be a lifesaver for me or my loved ones, but not right now. I need to get my affairs in order. Of course, that is, do as you please, said the doctor. Well, that's it. I've got a one-way ticket. All I can do is pray that it's not too hard to leave. Too bad I'm an atheist, Charles thought as he walked home. Lara, already realizing that her husband was in a bad way, insisted that he should go to a hospital or something. She couldn't bear to take care of a sick man. But there were no places to go, and Charles didn't want to go anywhere. This, of course, meant listening to his wife's constant accusations of selfishness, moaning about her ruined life, cursing her fate. And one day, exhausted from the endless care of her husband and child, the young woman could not stand it. In the evening, having put her son to bed, having given her husband an anesthetic injection, she packed up and left, forever. Waking up, Charles first waited for her, then became worried, walked around the apartment. On the dressing table, he saw a piece of paper with the single word "gone." Checked it. There was no money, no jewelry, no Lara's most prized possessions. "Dad, when is Mom coming?" Came the voice of his son behind him. The boy stood still, not dressed, rubbing his eyes with his fists. "I don't know, kid. You go and get dressed, okay? I'll make you something to eat." "What would you like?" "I don't know, for Mommy to come. There's cookies in there. I'll get them myself. Are you all right?" "Not quite, but I can make something." "You don't have to eat cookies in the morning, okay?" "My mom lets me. Is she sick too?" It was obvious that Gary was trying not to cry, but the near tears were already trembling in his eyes. "No, what are you? She'll be here soon, healthy and cheerful." Even this short conversation was tiring Charles, and he had to feed the child something else. He hadn't been hungry for a long time. He could hardly swallow any semi-liquid food in very small quantities. Well, he couldn't do it on his own, and Lara didn't seem to be coming back. Her leaving me was understandable. She'd been ready to do it for a long time, but the baby, how could she leave her son to a man who could die at any moment? Charles tormented himself with the thought. He realized that he would not be able to prepare anything for Gary, let him eat cookies with milk, and fell on the bed. He had to find the strength to call someone, but who? No one but David. They still need to settle the matter, with Charles part of the business. David, having barely heard of Charles' predicament, had come at once. Charles sold his half of the business to a friend, put some of the money into his son's account, and left the rest for medical treatment and a nurse. David helped with that too, quickly finding an elderly woman with a medical degree. She agreed to take care of both the patient and the child. "And you know, David, I want to call Molly, not for help, but for forgiveness. It's time for me to say goodbye to people, you know. Don't mind, you know." "Call her, sure." David approved of the idea. "I haven't talked to her in a while. I think she and Kayla had a falling out. You know, that pretty girl will say mean things to anyone, but I think her phone number is the same. So call her. You need to talk to her, of course. I'm sorry, but what you did was really stupid. I realized that myself, so I want to correct my mistakes." David waited for the nurse to arrive, clarified all the questions with her, told her about her duties and the peculiarities of caring for the patient. Charles, calmed down by the injection and the fact that the most urgent problems were somehow settled, fell asleep. He decided to call Molly tomorrow. This day was too exhausted by the few actions and heavy experiences that there was no strength anyway. He was well aware that there might not be any tomorrow, but there was no strength to overcome the drowsiness that overcame him after the injection. Molly, meanwhile, was living her life and was quite content with it. She successfully worked at the sewing factory, where she found a lot of new, good friends, and even wondered how she had managed to live differently before. It was not to say that she did not remember Charles at all. She did, and often worried about his health, comforting herself with the thought that he was living well, undergoing treatment. After all, if something really serious had happened to him, she would have been informed. Even though she was his ex-wife, but she was his wife. They had lived together for 10 years. She tried to call her ex-husband herself, but to no avail. Apparently, he changed his cell phone. Molly hadn't spoken to David or Kayla, so she couldn't ask them anything. And even if she could, she wouldn't. If she did, they'd think she was counting on the past to come back, which it wasn't. If Charles had even called her and offered to go back, to start over, she would have refused. She was satisfied with her present life. And suddenly he called. "Molly? I'm sorry I haven't called. I haven't had time. I mostly just wanted to apologize to you." "Yeah, I'm sorry. It's time to take stock." "Summarize what?" Molly was scared. "Are you not feeling well at all, Charles?" "Yes, Molly, it's my own fault. I neglected my health and, well, you know what I mean. The doctors won't even give me treatment. They say it's useless. Well, I mean, they do help. But, well, my song is over." "God, Charles, what a horror. What are you saying?" "Is there nothing? Molly, we're done talking about this. I know I'm sorry for what I did to you, and it's probably stupid to apologize, but don't curse me too much." "Yeah, what are you talking about? When have I ever cursed you?" Molly felt a cold wave roll down her spine. She believed Charles' words immediately. "Yeah, well, what else was there to expect? He's sick, he's dying, her Charles." No matter how their lives ended, she remembered the good things. She remembered him young, handsome, strong, and loving. "What can I do for you, Charles? Tell me. I mean, I'm sorry, of course, your wife? There's no wife anymore. Lara left me." "Oh my God! And Gary, you can't see him either?" "Gary, I can see him just fine. He's with me. She left him too." Charles sighed. "Where did she leave the baby?" "All right, never mind. But how do you live there?" Molly squinted at the abundance of unpleasant news. "We have a nurse, a very good one. She's a nurse by training with a lot of experience, helps me. I don't really suffer much, except mentally. I don't know, maybe leaving won't be too hard. Would you mind seeing me one last time?" Well, of course, Charles. Are you home? Why don't I come over right now?" "That would be very nice, Molly. I'd be so grateful to you for that." "Oh, come on. What gratitude?" "I'm coming over. Do you want me to bring anything?" "No, you don't need to bring anything. I've got everything." "I don't need anything, just to see you." "I'll be there." "I'll call a cab. I'll be there in an hour." "Wait for me. Molly's in a hurry. I'm really waiting." The woman hung up the phone and scurried around her room. The apartment was empty now. She didn't have many neighbors. An old woman whose children had taken her to a country house, and a couple who were not very old. The husband and wife, who at this moment were at work. Molly had the day off this day. She rushed to the closet to pick out clothes, then waved goodbye. She wasn't going on a date, and how she looked didn't matter. Oh my God, Charles. Charles is mine, dying. What can we do? There's nothing we can do. Just don't upset him anymore. Molly hurriedly dressed and cleaned herself up, and then the doorbell rang. Who could it be? With annoyance, she thought, opened the door. The neighbor from the first floor, a bitter drunk. He often went to all the apartments, came to Molly and borrowed money. Molly never gave. She knew perfectly well that such people, once you give them as if in a loan, they will not return it, but they will consider that you are obliged to give them money for drinks always. She wasn't going to give them anything now either. Molly, what are you doing? Breathing a little booze, older man. I would never, but tonight I have to. I'm so happy because my eldest is back. He came from the zone. He was released early, of course, for good behavior. I wish he'd behaved like that at home. But we started celebrating 3 days ago. But we were celebrating, and then we ran out of money. But now we won't be short of money. James is going to work, and so am I. We'll give it to you. Don't you doubt it. I'll give it to you like a bayonet. No, I got it. Go on, Bob. Molly tried to close the door, but the drunk had a grip on the door jamb. Molly, be a human being. Her roommate urged her on. I'm not just asking you to do this. I'm telling you I have joy. Well, what are you completely without sympathy, or what? She seems to be a good woman, a beautiful woman, and she's going somewhere, on a date apparently. It was impossible to bear it, but she couldn't fight with that alcoholic. All right, but it's only once, remember? Don't come back. I have no time to argue with you now. I have a sick relative to visit. She, without looking, pulled out of her purse some bill, slipped it to him. And that's good for you. It's a holy thing to visit a sick person. We'll drink to his health, and to you, and to everything. The man's eyes greedily dug into the purse. In Molly's hands, he saw perfectly well that there were still a lot of papers there. Why are you squirming, as if you were giving the last one? You've got a lot there, he said rudely. You could have given me more. We don't need one bottle. We each need 2. Go away. Molly slammed her purse shut, put it away, and then a rough hand grabbed her purse. Come on, you fool. I told you I'll pay you back. We'll pay you back. It's a sin to be greedy for something like this. Stop it, you rascal. Molly shouted, snatching the bag from his hands. But where was she to fight the still strong man, who also needed a drink? He was not going to give up such a prey. He pulled the bag to himself, pushed Molly, and not calculating the forces, she fell, hitting her head on the nightstand. Oh, you! The neighbor spoke up. That's what greed leads to. Why are you lying there? Yeah, she passed out, but that's okay. The man grabbed his bag, took out his purse, moved Molly. She did not react. Or did she just die? Come on, women people are resilient people, would have given immediately and would be alive and well, muttered the neighbor, running away with the booty. Molly was left lying there with blood under her head. Luckily, the neighbors came home from work, saw what had happened, and called an ambulance. Molly was taken to the hospital with a severe concussion and serious injury. Charles waited for Molly for several hours, but she never showed up. He tried to call back, but the ex-wife did not pick up the phone. Well, it's all clear. At first she promised, but then she sat and thought about it and decided there was no need to poison her soul. Fair enough. What can I say? Well, at least we talked on the phone. Thanks for that. I think it's him. The patient's condition steadily worsened, and the next day He asked the nurse to call David and ask him to come over. I couldn't even pick up the phone. He's not feeling well. Come over soon. Maybe you'll catch him. He probably wants to say goodbye or make some arrangements. And then there's Gary. I'm afraid I'll frighten the child. The old woman could hardly hold back her tears. Gary didn't quite understand what was going on with his father, but he felt something very bad was coming. Aunt Clara, why are you crying? Is Daddy sick again? He asked the nurse. Yes, baby, it's bad, but don't worry, everything will get better. She didn't know how to calm the child. She saw that words were powerless. Moreover, his father was the only relative for the boy. David came, listened to the last orders of his friend. Fortunately, even before Charles finally fell asleep, they had time to solve the business, and most importantly, Charles had filed a divorce from Lara and deprived her of her maternal rights because she never showed up. David, I feel sorry for Gary. He's got no one. I don't want him to grow up in an orphanage. The dying man whispered. Don't worry, Charles. I'm not leaving the boy. I've got no kids of my own. I'm raising this one with Kayla. She won't mind. They're talking about kids themselves. David doubted his wife would be okay with a stranger's kid, but he was sure she wouldn't protest. Thank you, friend. The dying man squeezed David's hand with cold fingers. A couple days later, Charles was gone. No one knew where Lara was. They tried to report Molly's funeral, but her phone was still off. None of the ex-wives were at the funeral. David kept his promise and took Gary back to his place, causing Kayla's expected displeasure. But really great. I didn't raise other people's kids. No one expects you to do that. You're an educator, you know that. Just be nice to Gary. Don't show your displeasure. You didn't want your own. Don't want other people's kids. I want my baby, okay? Yeah, please, I don't mind. You're pouting, Kayla. It's just that Gary has a mother, and we're not involved. He doesn't have a mother. She's gone. She's disenfranchised. And we're done talking about this, okay? Kayla had to accept it. She was afraid to cross her husband. She depended on him for everything. Her well-being, her ability to attend events, to travel several times a year. In a divorce, she would be left with nothing. And lately, it was felt that David was not satisfied with their family life. Having children of her own she didn't want, and now she couldn't have any more. So there was nothing to count on in a divorce. Going back to her parents? It was scary to think about it. They had to accept the arrival of a stranger's baby in their home. Molly was in the hospital for a month. When she came to her senses, she immediately thought, Charles, but she couldn't remember what was wrong with Charles. At first it seemed to her that they were not divorced, they lived together. Her husband was waiting for her somewhere and she didn't immediately remember what had happened. She only told the policeman about some scary man who pushed her. However, the neighbor was found out right away. He wasn't even leaning. Molly remembered where she was going before the accident, but it turned out that her phone was also missing. The neighbor admitted that he had stolen the phone, but had given it to his son, and he had gone somewhere else. The patient's condition steadily worsened, and the next day, he asked the nurse to call David and ask him to come over. I couldn't even pick up the phone. He's not feeling well. Come over soon. Maybe you'll catch him. He probably wants to say goodbye or make some arrangements. And then there's Gary. I'm afraid I'll frighten the child. The old woman could hardly hold back her tears. Gary didn't quite understand what was going on with his father, but he felt something very bad was coming. Aunt Clara, why are you crying? Is Daddy sick again? He asked the nurse. Yes, baby, it's bad, but don't worry, everything will get better. She didn't know how to calm the child. She saw that words were powerless. Moreover, his father was the only relative for the boy. David came, listened to the last orders of his friend. Fortunately, even before Charles finally fell asleep, they had time to solve the business, and most importantly, Charles had filed a divorce from Lara and deprived her of her maternal rights because she never showed up. David, I feel sorry for Gary. He's got no one. I don't want him to grow up in an orphanage. The dying man whispered. Don't worry, Charles. I'm not leaving the boy. I've got no kids of my own. I'm raising this one with Kayla. She won't mind. They're talking about kids themselves. David doubted his wife would be okay with a stranger's kid, but he was sure she wouldn't protest. Thank you, friend. The dying man squeezed David's hand with cold fingers. A couple days later, Charles was gone. No one knew where Lara was. They tried to report Molly's funeral, but her phone was still off. None of the ex-wives were at the funeral. David kept his promise and took Gary back to his place, causing Kayla's expected displeasure. But really great. I didn't raise other people's kids. No one expects you to do that. You're an educator, you know that. Just be nice to Gary. Don't show your displeasure. You didn't want your own. Don't want other people's kids. I want my baby, okay? Yeah, please, I don't mind. You're pouting, Kayla. It's just that Gary has a mother, and we're not involved. He doesn't have a mother. She's gone. She's disenfranchised. And we're done talking about this, okay? Kayla had to accept it. She was afraid to cross her husband. She depended on him for everything. Her well-being, her ability to attend events, to travel several times a year. In a divorce, she would be left with nothing, and lately, it was felt that David was not satisfied with their family life. Having children of her own she didn't want, and now she couldn't have any more. So there was nothing to count on in a divorce. Going back to her parents, it was scary to think about it. They had to accept the arrival of a stranger's baby in their home. Molly was in the hospital for a month. When she came to her senses, she immediately thought, Charles, but she couldn't remember what was wrong with Charles. At first it seemed to her that they were not divorced, they lived together. Her husband was waiting for her somewhere, and she didn't immediately remember what had happened. She only told the policeman about some scary man who pushed her. However, the neighbor was found out right away. He wasn't even leaning. Molly remembered where she was going before the accident, but it turned out that her phone was also missing. The neighbor admitted that he had stolen the phone, but had given it to his son, and he had gone somewhere else. And Molly, she couldn't remember any numbers, not Charles, or at least David. Her friends often visited her, but they couldn't help her. All she could do was hope for a speedy discharge. Even if she couldn't find a room, she could just visit Charles. Poor guy, how is he? What does he think of me? That I was scared, didn't want to see him sick. Molly didn't know that her ex-husband had already been buried. She rushed the doctors to discharge him, but they told her, no, it's the head. You have a serious injury. You don't want to end up severely disabled, do you? Molly didn't want that at all, so she faithfully followed all the instructions, hoping that the injury would not have such serious consequences. At David's house, meanwhile, other events were unfolding. Kayla, having accepted that Gary would now live in their house, nevertheless did not give up hope of getting rid of the child. The only way to do that was to find Lara. Whether she was disenfranchised or not, she was still the birth mother. Her rights can be restored. She's a normal woman. She doesn't drink. But why did she run away? So nerves couldn't stand it. Her husband was dying. Who could put up with that? She and Lara did not become friends, but still some contacts with mutual acquaintances remained. Not without difficulty. Kayla managed to contact the fugitive and tell her that Charles had died. Really so soon? The young widow was surprised. I didn't know. What about the inheritance? And that if you expect to get something, you must hurry. I don't know how possible it is. Charles had time to divorce you, but the child is still there, and no one can deprive him of anything. It's true, you've been disenfranchised. What? Why would I do that? Where is he now, Gary, with you? Well, I'll come and get him. He's registered in the apartment, and I'll live there with him. I'm the birth mother. I was wrongfully deprived of my rights. I can prove that. Is the apartment intact? It's a good thing Molly didn't show up to claim it. And thank you, Kayla, for at least letting me know. Now I'm gonna come over and let anyone try to say a word. Lara really didn't hesitate and soon arrived. Kayla met her. David was at work. The women met like best friends. Gary, hearing his mom's voice from the room, jumped out and rushed over to her. Mommy, you came and our daddy is gone. We'll come home with you, won't we? Really, my sunshine, really, chicken. Mommy will never leave you again. You love me, don't you? Lara was pretending to be so sweet. Can't we wait for David? He's responsible for the baby? I don't care what he's responsible for. I'm the mother, not him. Oh, I don't have the key to the apartment. Well, we do. Kayla pulled out a bunch of keys. Well, fine. Tell your David that Gary and I went home and he doesn't have to worry anymore. You mean he'll drop off the paperwork later? I've got to get my pension and stuff, and I'll figure it out later. Gary, what are you standing there for? Pack your things and let's go. You want to go home? Yes, but do you want to come back here? Uncle David is a good man. He promised to be my daddy. We'll find you a better dad than any David. Get ready, I said. Kayla, can you lend me a big bag? Both women began to pack in a hurry. They wanted to get there before David arrived. They knew he'd be against Gary being taken away, even by his own mother. We made it. Kayla was ready to sing and dance when the door closed behind Lara and Gary. At last, they would be living alone together again, without that sullen, whiny, unsociable child. She had tried sincerely to get along with him and Gary and the cute, candy, toy, and he still turned his nose up at her. Lara's right. Don't listen to David. Oh, how can a child survive such a tragedy? You're a great teacher. What kind of tragedy can there be with these bedbugs at 5 years old? He lives on his own. No one hurts him. He's well fed. What's the tragedy? He understands a lot. His father died. He didn't die. On Joy, Kayla opened a bottle of wine to celebrate the release, but also to give herself courage to talk to David, who, of course, will express dissatisfaction when he learns about what happened. David was, of course, displeased by his wife's behavior, or rather, indignant to the core. How could you give the child away, Kayla? We are responsible for him. How could I not? Kayla snapped at him, having gained courage. And besides, who did I give it to, gypsies or something? Lara is his own mother. She has the right. You should have seen how the boy rushed to her. I couldn't tear him away by force. He was already looking at me like a wolf. And it's easy for you to be responsible when you're away all day, and I'm here to take care of him. Yeah, you've had it up to here. That's right. The kid doesn't belong with you. I mean you with him. You're drunk in the middle of the day. What kind of person are you? What kind of woman are you? You used to be a normal girl. Now you've become an evil, useless woman. David looked at his wife squeamishly. David, what are you doing? Kayla mumbled fearfully, suddenly realizing that she had gone too far in her actions and words. Do you want to go together and pick up Gary? I miss him too. Lara went over there to their apartment. That's why I gave her the keys, so she wouldn't go anywhere. Let's go. Come on, David. What a lying, insolent bitch you are. David replied with disgust. I'm not going anywhere with you. I don't even want to see you. David. Kayla howled pitifully. She went to her husband, but he went into the room he had set up as his office and slammed the door shut. Ignoring his wife's whimpering in the hallway, he dialed Lara's number. Lara, are you home? Gary with you? He asked in a decisive tone. Yes, we're home. Gary is with me and with his new father, but it's none of your business. Stay out of our lives, the woman replied cheekily. Remember one thing. You can't be in Gary's and my life. You're nothing to the boy now. You have no right to be in this apartment, much less this new father. Tell him that. If you don't want any serious problems, tomorrow morning, clear the place out, and I'll come get Gary. We'll see which one of us gets in trouble, Lara shouted, but David did not continue the argument and hung up the phone. I hope nothing happens to Gary until tomorrow. I'll go there in the morning with all the documents and, if necessary, with the police. Hoping at first to settle the matter amicably, I set off alone the next morning. And at Charles' house, I met Molly. She was coming out of the front door in tears. Molly, exclaimed the astonished David, how are you here? Where have you been? Why couldn't we find you? David, how could we? Charles is really gone. Sobbing, Molly asked. Yes, she had just been discharged from the hospital yesterday, having undergone all the necessary examinations and recommendations that would allow her to avoid the consequences of a rather serious trauma. One of the conditions was to avoid stress. It's funny how people follow that advice. Molly went home from the hospital to a rented apartment. Neighbors visited her, said the room was left behind, nothing to worry about. Indeed, the room remained locked. Molly had locked it that day on her way to see Charles. This time she decided to take her time to tidy up, take a break from her long stay in the hospital. The neighbor's grandmother greeted her like family. Molly, we were so worried about you. And Bob, that thug, they took him away. He's not just you. He's got a lot of complaints against him. God gave the neighbors, the whole family's like that. The son gets out of jail, the father goes to jail, and then it's the other way around. You rest, sweetheart, wash up, wash off the hospital smell, and I'll make you a nice cup of tea. Thank you, Cindy. Tell me, has anyone come to see me? Your girls from work came by to tell me what's going on. And no, there was no one else. Well, if there was something to tell, they would have found me. Molly decided and didn't go to Charles until the next morning. Lara opened the door, strangely enough. Charles had said she'd gone away. Well, she's back, so she must have a conscience. Hello, I'd like to see Charles, Molly asked. Lara, with a strange expression on her face, looked her over from head to toe. Hello, why would you want to see Charles? She asked with a slight sneer. Only you're too late, my dear predecessor. There is no Charles. He was buried almost a month ago. He died? So soon? Molly gasped, slumping her shoulder against the jamb. Why wait? As if she didn't know he'd been sick for a long time. But don't worry, even if you grabbed it right away, you wouldn't have gotten anything. Gary and I are the first heirs, and you're not even in the picture. Ex-wife is nobody. A tall young guy appeared from the back of the apartment. Lara, are you holding the door open? It's drafty. Oh, good afternoon. I'd like to invite a charming guest into the house. Good day to you. Angrily threw Lara, Molly, and slightly pushed her away, slammed the door, But Molly was no longer interested in the girl's words, nor in the sounds of some altercation from behind the closed door. There was a pounding in her head. Charles was dead. Charles was dead, and she hadn't even said goodbye to him, and he'd been waiting and maybe looking at the door until the last minute, hoping she'd come. She stood like that for a few minutes, not noticing the tears running down her cheeks. Then she wiped her face, walked out of the front door, and ran right into David. "Yes, Molly, they buried him, alas. They've been trying to reach you, but your phone's not answering. Why don't we sit down, calm down, and then we'll go to the cemetery. 40 days soon. Have you been to the apartment?" David asked. "No, I called. Lara opened the door. I told her, that's all." "Have you seen the boy, Gary?" The man was worried. "No, there was some stranger there. A new husband or something. Lara, that one. I've decided to take Gary for myself, under guardianship for the time being, and then adopt him. He stayed with us after the funeral. I don't know how Lara got wind of it, but she showed up yesterday while I was out and took him away, and Kayla gave him to me, the bitch. I wouldn't be surprised if she told Lara too. She doesn't want the baby, that's how it is. I think I'm gonna divorce her, because I'm gonna take Gary anyway, and why would a kid want to live with someone who doesn't love him? And then divorce, grab, run. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just not really comfortable with divorce, for obvious reasons. Charles wanted to see me, he called me. She told David the circumstances under which she was injured. Dan drunk, because Charles probably thought I just changed my mind, and now he won't find out. Who knows? Maybe he really does see and know everything now. I should take his son. I promised him I wouldn't leave him, especially not with Lara and her boyfriend. Will you come with me? Molly could see that David wanted her to come for some reason, and she herself was not indifferent to the fate of the child, who was taken away by a cuckoo mother who lived with some strange guy. We went upstairs, called the apartment again. What the hell is this? Are we going to get some peace today or not? Lara screamed before she could open the door. When Molly and David saw her, she started on an even higher note. What? Are you bringing a cheerleader? It's not gonna help you. Oh, David, is that who else is here? Stop it, Lara. Give me Gary and the keys and get out of here. David said firmly, don't get the police involved. What else do you want? You're so clever. The woman was first, but David stopped her. Enough already, don't bring the police into this. You have no rights, not to the apartment, not to the child. Gary, are you there? Let go, you fool. The boy shouted from the room. Gary jumped out of the room and ran to David. Uncle David, take me away. I don't want to live with that Thomas. Thomas, I told you to hold the bastard. Gary, come here. Don't you want to live with Mommy? Lara screamed at the kid. I want to live with you, but I won't live with him. He says I've got an extra mouth, and I should be turned in, cried the baby. Thomas himself appeared from the room, a guy of about 20 years old. He paid almost no attention to the newcomers and immediately attacked Lara. What's that supposed to mean? You said that the apartment is yours, and here in the morning, some hordes are walking around and even threatening the police. That's all you need. It's mine, it's mine. The woman stomped her foot. All right, Lara, stop it. David cut her off. You know perfectly well that you have nothing to do with this apartment, as well as with the child. You'll have to attract young lovers by some other virtues, before you lose them. Pack up, and you, young man too. Let's skip the police. We don't have time for that, and we don't want to scare the baby. That's what the man says. Lara, you've been talking for nothing. both about the apartment and the money. You've been lying." "That's it, man. I'm leaving." "I don't need to be fighting over other people's apartments." "Thomas, where you going?" "I'm not leaving. My son is registered here. I have to live with him." Lara tried to shake her rights, realizing that she was about to lose everything, but David finally interrupted her speech. Seeing that her lover was really going to leave, Lara clung to him and begged him to wait until she was ready. Scattering curses at David, Molly, and the baby at the same time, she quickly gathered herself and quickly ran to catch up with her young man, ignoring even the timid mommy uttered by Gary sitting in Uncle David's arms. As the door slammed shut, he cried pitifully, "I'm not going to have a mommy again." He sobbed. "Don't cry, baby," gently said Molly, and took him out of David's arms. "Tell me, have you eaten better today?" "Not yet," they said later. "And yesterday?" Molly wrinkled painfully at the sad hair, that little man. "Yesterday I ate a bun. They also gave me fish, but it was very salty. And today there's nothing there." "All right, let's go back to my place." She left the keys, here they are, but never mind, we'll have to change the lock anyway, just in case. "Let's go back to my place now." "Molly, do you want to go too, or do you want to stay here?" Molly stood on the doorstep of the room where her Charles had spent his last days. No, I'm not staying here." Wiping her tears again, Molly said, "And I have no right to, either. I'll go to my place. I'm renting a room. Why don't you want to come with us?" "Let's go." David encouraged her. "But why not? Kayla is there, and she, has a special attitude towards me." She waved her hand. "You don't have to think about Kayla. Bygone's Kayla, I think it's serious." David frowned. "What? Aunt Kayla won't be there either?" Gary guessed. "That's good. I didn't like her very much either. Why is it that if Uncle is good, Auntie is bad? And if Mommy's good, she has some Thomas who's bad? Auntie, do you have a bad husband too?" Molly smiled. "Get your stuff together, why don't you?" "No, I don't have any husband, not anymore. I must be bad." "No, you seem nice." "All right, I'm packed. What if Mom comes? She'll know where she is, right?" "Of course she will." I patted him on the head. She was at my place. If she's going to be without Thomas, I'd go with her. Gary promised sadly. "Will you come with us, Aunt Molly?" "No, honey, I won't. But we'll see each other again. Don't be sad. Aunt Kayla's waiting for you. She's not bad at all, you'll see. And David, call me when you go to the cemetery. I'd really like to visit Charles' grave." She whispered quietly to David. He promised to call and pick her up. "Get in the car. Can I at least give you a ride home?" he said. Molly agreed, since getting on public transportation would be too long, and she felt quite exhausted by the events of the morning. On the way home, she marveled that the pinch of sadness from the news of Charles's death had been replaced by a light sadness. Maybe she had Gary to thank for that, as he fiddled with some toy, talking to her or to one of the adults. After all, he could have been my son. With a smile, she thought. David was thoughtful too, but not sad, but rather preoccupied, thinking about his upcoming meeting with Kayla and his separation from Molly. Yes, once he and Charles had both been in love with this girl, but she had chosen Charles, and in David's heart there was still the regret of unfulfilled love. Yes, he had other women, he had a wife, but the feeling of such strength that he had felt for Molly was not repeated. And now he was thinking that Charles' death would probably change a lot of things in their lives, but they said goodbye at Molly's house as friends, promising each other and Gary that they would meet again many times. Kayla greeted her husband and boy with fake joy, trying to atone for the harsh words she had spoken earlier. She threw her arms around Gary, telling him how glad she was, how much she missed him. The boy smiled politely but pulled away. "You should have fed him and then hugged him." Disgruntled, David said. Kayla led the boy into the kitchen, asking him what was up with his mom, where she had gone, and why. Gary livened up a little, talking about his life with his mom and how Uncle David had kicked her and that nasty Thomas out. But suddenly he mentioned that Aunt Molly was with them. Kayla immediately flared up, ran to her husband to confront him. "So that's why you went there. You went to see Molly. You think I didn't notice that you two had been having an affair for a long time. Are you crazy? What affair? Where?" She came to ask about Charles. She was in the hospital. She didn't know he was dead. And she came here so cleverly to meet you. Who are you telling? Why didn't you give her the boy? You brought him back to me. I take it the hugging and kissing is over. Here we go again, dragging him around. If you don't like it, you can go anywhere now. That's it. I could really get bored and leave. Doesn't that scare you? Sit down, Kayla. David sighed tiredly. It doesn't frighten me at all. Yes, I've had enough of your consumerist attitude toward our marriage, toward me, for a long time. I'd like you to leave, though I realize that's almost unrealistic. Kayla was scared again. She had no feelings for David, but material dependence held her much stronger than mental dependence. She started crying again, swearing that she would be the perfect mother for Gary, the best wife for David, and everything remained the same, but not for long. Kayla couldn't play the role of good mother for long. It cost her nothing to leave the boy home alone, without even making dinner, leaving only an admonition. Sit quietly and don't say a word when he comes home. I'll bring you a chocolate bar. But to restrain her nature, she could not even in front of her husband, now and then snapped at the child. In the end, her manner of leaving the child alone almost led to tragedy. Trying to cook, sit down, eat, he could not cope with the gas stove, and if the neighbors had not helped, there could have been a fire. After this, David declared that he did not want to live with her anymore and filed for divorce. After a series of scandals and tantrums, Kayla left, taking everything of value from the house. David was not in the claim, considered that this is not the most expensive price for freedom from such a woman. All this time he sometimes met with Molly, often talked to her on the phone, but for a long time did not dare to confess his feelings. It was only after finalizing his divorce from Kayla that David finally said that she, Molly, was and still is the dearest woman in his life. I never would have said that if I'd lived with Charles. Back then, as a young man, I just didn't dare interfere in your relationship. I saw how you loved someone else and he reciprocated. As a result, I thought I could be content to see you, even if it was as your best friend's wife. What to say about that now, David? It's a thing of the past. Why shouldn't it, this case, be the present? I realize now that I'm not the most advantageous fiancé, divorced with a child, and I'm in no hurry to have you. But think still, could we be husband and wife? Isn't that completely impossible? I'm sorry, but it's impossible to propose like that. Molly smiled. So is that the only problem? David rejoiced. Contrary to my name, I've always been so unromantic. Thanks for the tip. The man suddenly got down on one knee, took a beautiful box out of his pocket, opened it and handed it to Molly. Become my wife, Molly. I've been preparing for this day for so long. Molly pressed her palms to her cheeks and laughed happily.